video response to Libertarian Pro-Lifers, by Marinals Tessix, who can't believe that some people are libertarians and also pro-life. Well, I don't know why you can't believe it. Let's take a look at what libertarianism is. You seem to think libertarianism is a political party, and that people who are libertarians necessarily identify with the Libertarian Party. My experience is that most people who are libertarians despise the Libertarian Party with a passion. So the tenets of the Libertarian Party are not necessarily identical to the views of any person who calls themselves libertarian or who's associated in some way with libertarianism. The libertarians have a number of different views on different issues, of course, but if libertarianism has a defining feature, a central doctrine, it's the non-aggression axiom, which is no one has the right to initiate force against somebody else. Okay, and the keywords there are initiate force. All right. So what does that mean? It means that any action, whether it's civil or economic, which involves me exerting force or aggression or violence or the threat of violence against you for some end of my own, is illegal. Okay, that it's illegal by definition, and that no one should be permitted to do that. All right, and that includes the state. If you believe in a state, I don't believe in states. So if you're an anti-statist, it's because you don't think that a state can exist without violating this axiom by its very definition. Well, that's an in-house argument between different kinds of libertarians, and I'm going to leave that aside for a second. The point is, if upon studying the non-aggression axiom, it should be relatively obvious why some libertarians be opposed to abortion. That all turns on the question of whether they regard the fetus as a human, or, as you said, I'm not sure exactly which words, but you said something to the effect of a bunch of cells. Okay. Now, this claim is always made by people who are pro-choice, and it's manifestly false. It's reductionist, and it's false. It's simply not true. It's not that the fetus, that the majority of abortions take place when a fetus is well more than a bunch of cells. So I'm going to show you some pictures of unborn fetuses, so that you can see that in fact a fetus is very much a little human person, a little human being. We can quibble about the definition of person, but it's definitely not a monkey. Let's see. Okay, so let's do that right now. Let's look at these pictures, and then I had to resist the temptation to show pictures of unborn fetuses here, because even though I think they make the point a lot better when you can see a little baby's arm ripped off the size of a dime, even though with fingerprints intact, that really makes the point about what you're doing when you have an abortion, that the procedure that you think you're having, or that you've been told that you're having, is not the procedure that's actually happening. What's happening is a barbaric fanticide that's being passed off as removing your tonsils or something. All right, so here's a picture of an unborn child from the first trimester. Okay, it's not an unborn alligator, it's not an unborn mouse, it's not an unborn gorilla, it's an unborn human. It's a fetus, which means little one in Latin. Second trimester, third trimester. Now each of the babies pictured in the photo has a heartbeat and fingerprints, human DNA, not alien DNA, not alligator DNA, but human DNA. Alright? I felt the need to qualify it by saying, well, they're not really children anyway. They're blobs of tissue or bunches of cells. If that's the case, then presumably you do have a problem with killing what is manifestly a child. So I can only assume then that if you have a problem with killing you would have a problem with killing an infant. Okay? an infant that's been born. So only moments after it's been born, suddenly for some reason its nature changes and it's okay to kill it. Maybe you can explain that. One of the common claims made by pro-abortion people is that a human being, because it's radically dependent upon its mother, and it can't exist outside of her in many cases. Even an infant is radically dependent on its mother and can't exist without constant care and supervision. Indeed, more supervision and more care than for a child in the womb. Because the child in the womb is at least attached to its mother and doesn't need to have its diaper changed. It doesn't need to be fed. It's not nearly as dependent in that way as a newborn child. Similarly, if we take that criteria, if we say that you have to be, in order to be considered a person, you have to be independent and self-sufficient, and you're not a person unless you're independent and self-sufficient, well then we'd have to rule out the elderly, who can no longer take care of themselves, the sick, the very sick people, invalids, the mentally deficient, and nor is it a coincidence that some of the same people pushing for abortion are also pushing for euthanasia, and these points of view have been historically linked. So there's obviously more at stake here than just the unborn child, the fetus, if you prefer. But what's at stake here is the principle, and what's the principle? The principle is the non-aggression axiom. Specifically, the logic that undergirds the non-aggression axiom, which is that life deserves to be respected, that all our values about social life have to be rooted in life and in basic respect for life. We cannot have law without respect for life. We can't argue for anything without a basic respect for life. Alright, so let's talk a little bit here. Let's go deeper into this question of libertarianism and being pro-life. The basic assumption of the pro-abort worldview, and indeed behind the sexual revolution, is that we decide what sex is and what it means for us. Sex is taken to be something that has no intrinsic nature, but that we get to choose what it is. All right. And that point should be particularly relevant to libertarians, because similar to fallacious reasoning is involved in economic policies that we oppose. Right? Let me show you how this works. The pro-inflationist says that we owe it to ourselves to have full employment and full economic liberty and full economic freedom, as they define it, which can be sustained in the short term by pursuing an inflationary monetary policy which allows us positive freedom to borrow and sell at ever-increasing prices without corresponding self-discipline, right? To have interest rates that are low without the reserves that are needed to keep them low, okay? The statist is a volitionalist who believes that he decides what the economy is and what it should do, and the result is contradictions and disaster. He has mentally separated the result he wants, prosperity, from the means which is necessary to achieve it. He does not respect the nature of economic growth and of the economy, so he thinks that he can do whatever he wants, provided he has enough power. The pro-choicer is in the same position with respect to sex. Pro-choicer views sex as an act that can mean whatever he or she wants it to mean. So if you and your partner decide that you're just having sex for recreation, then that's all it is. If you and your partner decide you're just having sex to grow closer to each other and that you don't want a baby, then that's all it is. The problem is that that's not what sex is. Sex is an act which by its nature is procreative. It's not a coincidence that the time of the month when a woman is most desirable and desiring of sex is the time when she's most fertile. Your body wants to get pregnant. Now, there are various ways around this. You can use birth control. You can avoid sex at those times of the months when you're more likely to get pregnant. But the problem that I have with birth control is that it helps a person to mentally separate the one aspect of sex, which you can call the unitive aspect, the fun part of sex, from the the other part of sex, which is the procreative aspect, the part of the fact that sex brings about life. Now, you can mentally separate those two things, but you can't always biologically separate them. Birth control fails. What invariably happens is that either they forget to use the birth control, or they use it and it doesn't work, and you get pregnant. Then, at that point, the unborn child seems like a burden. It seems like something that's in the way, and there's all this talk about, well, what did I do to deserve this? I never intended to get pregnant. Well, yes, you did. You had sex, and sex has that result. Right? Just as you can't say, if you're a government official, that you never intended to destroy the economy if you willingly inflated the currency to the point where you destroy the economy.